Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We made a decision that she will not be welcomed back into our caucus.
Kicked out of caucus. Why the BC Conservatives have parted ways with embroiled MLA Dallas Brodie. And a second hitman has been sentenced to life in the murder of Rapudaman Singh Malik. His family says worries remain as they seek answers on who hired the killers. Plus, how cross-border shoppers are shifting their habits after a week of tariff confusion courtesy of the United States.
We're being a little bit more conscious with our buying decisions.
Even for gas, I very rarely went over. I want to protect our Canadian businesses.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Baneet Braich. Well, BC Conservative leader John Rustad has kicked an MLA out of caucus over comments she made in a podcast earlier this week. Rustad said Dallas Brodie mocked residential school survivors. And as Katie DeRosa reports, there are concerns other MLAs who have sided with Brodie could leave the caucus. And by late Friday afternoon today, that worry came true.
BC Conservative leader John Rustad has turfed his Attorney General critic Dallas Brodie after he says she mocked residential school survivors.
If we don't have truth, not his truth, her truth, my grandmother's truth, or, this whole thing about my truth and your truth, my truth. This stuff has to stop.
Brodie made the comments during a podcast, which was posted on YouTube earlier this week.
Obviously, Ms. Brodie, when she did the podcast, did something that I found very offensive, which was belittling residential school survivors.
The rookie MLA for Vancouver-Kilchena was talking about the backlash she faced, including from within her own caucus, to a social media post last month. She wrote, "The number of confirmed child burials at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School is zero. No one should be afraid of the truth." First Nations leaders and New Democrats said it was a form of residential school denial, a sentiment echoed by Conservative MLAs Alia Warbus and Peter Millibar.
I'm just happy that a decision's been made. It means that our caucus can focus, be on one message and goal together, and that we can get to the work that's at hand. This has been a huge distraction.
Brodie did not return calls from CBC Friday. In a post on X, she did not address the reasons for her firing, but doubled down on her original post. She said, quote, "The truth is a threat to powerful vested interest in this multi-billion-dollar reconciliation industry." She also said that politicians are transferring BC's wealth and power to, quote, "an elite racial minority, enriching opportunistic lawyers, consultants, and chiefs." Rustad made clear that Brodie was not removed for claiming that no graves had been found at the former residential school site. The Tecumlix First Nation found ground anomalies back in June of 2021, but as of now, no decision to excavate has been made. Wade Grant lives in Dallas Brodie's riding and works for the Musqueam First Nation.
We know children died there. We know children were abused there. Why do we have to go up and dig graves to prove it?
After clashing with other MLAs in a caucus meeting Thursday, Brodie stormed out. Two MLAs, Tara Armstrong and Jordan Keeley, followed her. Keeley announced late Friday afternoon that he's leaving the party to sit as an independent. He posted on Facebook that he's lost faith in Rustad and the, quote, "toxic mess the BC Conservatives have become." He says he intends to form a new party with real conservative values. CBC News had asked Rustad if he expected more MLAs to leave the party with Brodie. He admitted that's a possibility. Whether more will follow remains to be seen. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
And a hitman who killed a former Air India bombing suspect has been sentenced to life in prison with no parole for 20 years. Jose Lopez is one of two men who pleaded guilty in the death of Rapudaman Singh Malik after he was shot and killed outside his family business in Surrey in June of 2022. Malik's death came 17 years after he was acquitted of charges related to the deaths of 331 people in the Air India case. Lopez's co-accused, Tanner Fox, received the same sentence in January. And after much back and forth, U.S. tariffs on some Canadian goods are on pause for now. But some Canadian shoppers and American businesses say they still feel stuck in uncertainty. Pinky Wong has more.
Cross-border shoppings are common among border town residents. Oftentimes, people are crossing the borders to shop for necessities like groceries and gas. I talked to some and asked if their shopping patterns have changed since the tariffs took effect.
We're being a little bit more conscious with our buying decisions, and we'll see going forward. Mostly he likes to go to Target and we buy some toys and that sort of items for him. And then in terms of groceries, like Trader Joe's, we have certain items that would go down to Trader Joe's. The fact that there's this little bit of animosity is actually quite frustrating.
How long have you been crossing the border to get gas?
Years. It's always 30 or 40 cents cheaper there than it is up here. It's ridiculous to cross the border and come back and get 25% stuck on the bill.
We have to stand up for Canada. They're poking us in the eye, so we got to poke them back.
For some residents in Delta, crossing the border for shopping has never been a habit.
Never have, and certainly won't now. In terms of the milk and the dairy and stuff, I don't find the quality is as good.
Even for gas, I very rarely went over. I protect our Canadian businesses. Why should I go across the United States?
We're very proud of being Canadian. We're very cautious about where we spend our money and our funds. Travel preferences, we've been traveling to Europe for years now. Ever since Trump got in the first time, we vowed we would never go back.
Some U.S. businesses have been feeling the pressure with less Canadian customers visiting. Gary Gill owns a convenience store and several gas stations in Blaine. He says Trump's tariff caused a 15% drop in business.
90% of our business is BC, Canadian-based, and for the last few days, we've been seeing decrease in Canadian business. And it's not a good sign for businesses. Not our border areas. All the border towns actually survives on Canadian business.
With the uncertainties that come with the tariffs, most Canadian shoppers say they will be supporting local business more. Pinky Wong, CBC News, near Point Roberts.
And if you have planned a quick cross-border shopping trip to pick up some groceries or clothes from Target, well, now it might cost you a lot more when you return to Canada. So Ottawa is not going to lift the tariffs it's levied on $30 billion worth of American goods, citing Trump's promised tariffs on steel and aluminum coming next week. And the Canada Border Services Agency has begun implementing a 25% tariff or surtax on a long list of goods from the U.S. Now, these items range from common groceries to cosmetics, clothing, and alcohol. And with trade war tensions, you might be buying more local goods. Well, some neighborhood businesses in Kamloops have been catering to a BC First clientele since they opened. Still, as Shelley Joyce reports, that's not to say tariffs won't impact them.
3,000 to 4,000 vehicles travel this route each weekday, right through a school zone and 2 marked crosswalks.
I am always afraid for my kids.
It's not safe for the little ones to walk by themselves. This is something we feared would happen, but we're not overly surprised.
A Kamloops woman is still recovering after being hit by a vehicle while walking through the crosswalk 2 weeks ago.
An awful thing for kids to see. She was going to be a substitute teacher on her way to school that morning and was crossing in the crosswalk when she was struck by a car.
Brenda Molnar is the president of the Sagebrush Neighborhood Association. She says the accident was a wake-up call for parents and kids who walk to school.
Our biggest worry is that there's going to be another pedestrian accident. A pedestrian is going to be hit. A child is going to be hit.
Most of the parents we talked to on this chilly morning were escorting their kids to school on foot or 2 wheels. They all advocated for fewer cars and more human-powered forms of transportation.
I think a community program where there's adult walkers for kids crossing the road and just working together to get more kids to school in an active, healthy way.
9th Avenue sees about 3,000 to 4,000 vehicles per day. Huge amount of volume comes in at between 8 and 8:30 for that drop-off event.
Spencer Bain is a transportation engineer with the city of Kamloops. Crosswalks in school zones are part of his responsibility. Tell me what can be done.
Right, so when we look at a situation like this, we sometimes call it the 3 E's. So engineering is the first one that people usually think about. It's the pavement markings and the signage. We have enforcement, and then education is another one.
Studies show that enhancements like signs and lights are most effective when paired with education and enforcement. 30K speed zones are the sweet spot for reducing crashes and their impact on pedestrians. And simply adding flashing or solid lights can reduce crashes by 69%. For some parents, these changes can't come soon enough.
I still think people drive too fast on this road, even because, they've dropped their kid off up there and they're done. So they speed down here.
Shelley Joyce, CBC News, Kamloops.
Environment Canada has issued a heavy rainfall warning for many parts of the south coast. An atmospheric river is expected to drench areas from tonight through Sunday. As Pinky Wong reports, the predicted weather event has some in North Vancouver taking extra steps to prepare.
Chad Friesen and his wife Linda Friesen are prepping ahead for the atmospheric river that is expected to hit BC through this weekend.
Worried is probably the best. It's almost like PTSD.
He's recalling the atmospheric river last October, which forced the family to leave their home.
All the debris and stuff that washed in, and it just gets into the house, and it's disruptive.
Friesen says at least 6 properties on Frome Road have water flowing from Kilmer Creek in their backyard, and says residents are calling for more flood mitigation efforts, especially near culverts.
It's so disheartening. They just don't know where to turn. We're asking the district for this help to do the work that they've started, to complete the work that they've started, but it's just been falling on deaf ears.
Residents here say the culvert has failed at least twice, once in 2014, most recently last October when water couldn't pass, overflowing onto the road. The District of North Vancouver says many upgrades have been completed along Kilmer Creek, but it currently has no documented life safety risk near Friesen's area. It says it's continuing to determine what other measures are needed in the district to better protect it from atmospheric rivers. Rain is expected to drench the South Coast. Environment Canada says West Vancouver Island and the South Coast Mountains could get up to 200 millimeters of rain. But the center says it doesn't know which areas will be hit the hardest, and it is not expecting significant flooding.
With this event, we are expecting freezing levels to remain quite modest, meaning that we are expecting heavy snow in the mountains, which will help replenish our snowpack.
BC Rivers Forecast Centre has issued a high streamfall advisory for parts of Vancouver Island and the South Coast. Back in North Vancouver, James Husford has already cleared the drains outside his home. It was also heavily flooded with debris last year.
We can't stop that. No matter what we do, it's a pinch point that we can't solve ourselves.
Meanwhile, the city of North Vancouver says it is also closing some trails as the storm approaches. Pinky Wong, CBC News, North Vancouver.
And Darius Madavi joins us now with another look at the weather. Darius, what are we expecting?
Right, so a bit of good news. This atmospheric river is a bit of a low-level one, still packing lots of moisture, but not as much as some other ones that we've seen. And an atmospheric river is not uncommon here in BC. And also, this one is not staying focused on one part of the coast. It's going to continue moving south pretty quickly over the next couple days, which means not one spot is getting blasted by that moisture all the way through. With that being said, some warnings have been issued. 80 to 120 millimeters possible on the west coast of the island, up to 80 millimeters here, and likely up to 80 millimeters over here as well, with maybe even higher amounts for the sea to sky. So we're already seeing that rain move in. Take all the preparations that you normally would when we're expecting a heavy rain event, but overall shouldn't see too widespread impacts.
All right, thanks, Darius. We'll check back in again. And more travel-related measles cases have been identified in Metro Vancouver. Up next, Health Canada officials are warning people to make sure their vaccinations are up to date.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox.
Check out CBC News BC, your local streaming channel. It's a free ad-supported TV channel that's available 24/7, delivering breaking news, including weather updates, daily headlines, and sharing stories that matter to British Columbians. Stream your favorite CBC programs like The Early Edition, BC Today, and On the Coast. CBC News BC is available on Roku, LG, and Samsung smart devices.
I think it's important to give a human face to the stories that we hear every day, the people that they affect. And I think talking to those people is what really gives us the true sense of the impact of the stories that we're hearing.
Fraser Health is warning people to make sure their vaccinations are up to date ahead of spring break. Now, this comes after 3 travel-related cases of measles were announced this week. The cases are linked to a trip to Southeast Asia. Mira Baines reports.
Ahead of spring break vacations, health officials are warning Canadians to protect themselves against the measles. Public Health Agency of Canada says there has been a sharp rise in cases around the world, including in popular vacation spots including Thailand and Mexico. Fraser Health says after 3 travel-related measles cases in BC's Lower Mainland, parents need to check immunization records.
If you haven't had 2 doses of measles-containing vaccine, please go get it. Even if you're traveling with young kids, even 1 dose is still better than no doses or no protection.
The recent cases of measles are linked to visits to Southeast Asia. The latest person infected ended up at a hospital ER. Health officials say anyone who visited Royal Columbian Emergency Department from 2:30 p.m. on Monday to 2:30 a.m. on Tuesday may have been exposed. The disease is highly infectious and is spread through the air, where it can linger for up to 2 hours. Symptoms include fever, dry cough, runny nose, and red eyes, and rash, which can develop up to 3 weeks after exposure. It can be very harmful to young children and their development.
Encephalitis, the brain swelling, is one of the main things that we are worried about, especially in young kids.
More than 200 cases have been reported in Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, and BC, more than all of last year. This Ontario mom says her newborn can't get the vaccine until after reaching 1 year old.
She's too little, she has no protection, and it's very contagious. So I even worry just bringing her out. I feel very angry that it's completely preventable. It was almost eradicated.
Most of those sick with the measles are children who are not fully immunized. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
For a full list of locations where the public may have been exposed to measles, visit fraserhealth.ca. And it's a historic day for the Musqueam First Nation as they announce the initialing of the Musqueam Self-Government Agreement with the federal government.
This agreement is a powerful step toward self-determination. Once in effect, it will revitalize Musqueam's inherent right to self-government, restoring the ability to develop laws, programs, services, and economic opportunities on your own terms.
It's been the vision of our community to be self-efficient and look after our own affairs since contact.
The milestone moves the First Nation a step closer to reestablishing self-governance away from the federal control under the Indian Act. The agreement will recognize Musqueam's jurisdiction within its reserve lands. Musqueam will also now begin conducting community engagement to finalize the Constitution and begin the process to ratify it. And Ottawa has awarded a $3.1 billion construction contract to C-SPAN's North Vancouver shipyards to build a new heavy polar icebreaker for the Canadian Coast Guard.
As our world becomes more complex and more uncertain, as international rivals attempt to undermine 80 years of unparalleled peace and prosperity, and old certainties are called into question, it is increasingly important that our brave women and men in the Coast Guard have state-of-the-art equipment on which they and we can rely.
The ship's construction marks the first time a polar icebreaker has been built in Canada in more than 60 years. The move is part of the national shipbuilding strategy to renew fleets and strengthen Canada's Arctic presence. And more than 1,000 BC public schools are getting a boost of healthy food as part of the National School Food Program.
My name is Kaylee.
And my name is Jasmine.
And we are students at David Thompson Secondary.
And that's two David Thompson Secondary students again emceeing the announcement today at their school in South Vancouver. British Columbia is the 10th province to sign on to the National Food Program. The government says the funding of nearly $40 million will go towards breakfasts, lunches, and snacks over the next 3 years and is crucial in rural and remote areas. And a look out at the late afternoon in Deep Cove, calm waters ahead of what is expected to be a wet weekend around the south coast. A rainfall warning is in effect for parts of Metro Vancouver and Howe Sound. Darius has you the full provincial forecast coming up. This Saturday marks International Women's Day. The gender gap in STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and math, remains significant. But we are going to take you inside one artificial intelligence lab where almost all the researchers are women. Our Yasmin Ranea spent a day at the lab that's bucking the trend.
We tried many different things.
Giving a presentation while holding your baby, not unusual at this lab.
It's not looked down upon to bring your kids into the lab if you need to.
6 out of 8, or 75% of researchers at SFU's Artificial Intelligence Lab are women, even though nationally, women make up less than a quarter of the people working in STEM careers.
It's cool to have so much collaboration with people who have an understanding of what it's like to be someone who is marginalized in that field.
The researchers say their projects are influenced by their experiences as women.
Would you be open to discussing a structured path for salary increase?
Charlotte Ho is developing an AI model to help women negotiate raises.
A lot of us are thinking AI is such a threat, but that is completely wrong, right? Because AI is an assistant for us to enhance our skills.
Other researchers are using AI for animation production and portrait design.
Why don't you tell me how you're feeling today?
I'm feeling joyful.
Well, that's nice to hear. Here's a painting of you feeling joyful.
Beyond the research, the women say the lab gives them much needed flexibility.
I've taken a number of years off to take care of my daughter, and I've come back to school, and they're very supportive of my personal needs.
The lab is headed by a man. He says he tries to bring more women into the lab, but knows he has to walk a fine line.
How do you do it in a way that's not overpowering? So I'm always thinking about those issues. Although in general, I just like to work with smart people.
This University of Alberta assistant professor who researches diversity in STEM says labs across the country should take note of SFU's lab.
When an environment is created where women can succeed, all kinds of women, with all different life experiences and all different needs can succeed, that's really incredible.
She says that will help create the next generation of remarkable researchers. Yasmin Ranea, CBC News, Surrey.
Ottawa has announced a $6 billion aid package for Canadian businesses impacted by U.S. tariffs. The money is meant to help farmers and exporters find new markets. Olivia Stefanovic has more.
In the midst of uncertainty, the federal government is trying to offer Canadian businesses stability.
We may not know what our American neighbors will do, nor what new tale they will tell, but we are ready.
Announcing $1 billion to support farmers and an additional $5 billion to help Canadian exporters losing U.S. sales.
We want our businesses to come out from under these tariffs.
We are moving ahead with these changes despite yesterday's pause, because businesses and workers need assurances right now.
To prevent layoffs, Ottawa is also relaxing some employment insurance rules to allow workers to receive partial benefits while working reduced hours.
Whether this is going to be enough to deal with a situation that we're facing now, time will tell. I think the only thing that anyone can be confident about this at this stage is that things are likely to change.
We want to see supports with ironclad strings attached, that they are tied to keeping jobs in place.
The NDP is calling for higher, more expansive EI payments.
Right now, 60% of workers don't get coverage, so we need to cover all workers.
Counter tariffs must not be a cash cow for the government.
Meanwhile, the Conservatives want retaliatory levies used to lower taxes.
With a small sum set aside for targeted relief to workers hardest hit by the trade war.
What a pleasure to see leaders of industry and different sectors.
Justin Trudeau made one of his final public appearances as Prime Minister, speaking with business leaders on edge from the trade war.
We have to make sure we come through this not just intact, but stronger than ever before.
That's the hope, especially of small businesses, bracing for steel and aluminum tariffs to possibly take effect next week.
I don't think even trade lawyers necessarily have a full understanding of exactly what the impact is going to be, but I think we're all
crystal clear about the fact that there's great uncertainty and worry.
As bad as tariffs could be, the Labor Minister says it won't be a COVID-like situation. The federal government is not expected to hand out checks to the scale it did during the pandemic, but will likely announce more support for workers. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
And with the opening salvos in the trade war unleashed, many industries are assessing the potential damage. Well, the CBC's Nicola Sagan takes a look at the impact in Atlantic Canada on construction.
People in the construction industry say it's a scramble trying to keep up to the ever-changing tariff landscape. They say there are two impacts. One is on exporters and those who build in the States. But they say the bigger impact is caused by Canada's counter tariffs. These are tariffs on $30 billion worth of American goods. Duncan Williams of the Construction Association of Nova Scotia says he estimates around 40 to 60% of construction materials in the province are imported from elsewhere, and he says a majority of that is coming from the States. The counter tariffs apply to things like plastic building materials like flooring, lumber and wooden building materials, and appliances for kitchens and bathrooms. Williams says contractors just can't eat these costs. Their profit margins are already too thin. So he says the impact will be on the consumer, so the renter, the homeowner, the retailer. He says the goalposts are just constantly changing, and this is impacting future projects.
You know, we don't have any predictability, and of course the current administration of the U.S. Is changing its requirements and terms on a day-to-day basis, and frankly, probably on an hour-by-hour basis right now. So just as we think we're starting to turn a corner and reach, some conclusion, the rules of the game continue to change. And that's, a direct result of President Trump.
He says this is pushing the industry even more towards making interprovincial trade easier. The industry in PEI is saying similar things. There's uncertainty, there's a lack of information, and the counter tariffs are impacting them the most. This is just pushing the industry to look for new markets.
We don't know until we go searching. I think it's tremendously important to go after that next, material supplier in other jurisdictions.
Sanderson says he's concerned, but he's hopeful we could come out of this stronger. He says Canada has gone through issues like this before, and we are resilient as a country. Nicola Sagan, CBC News, Halifax.
And municipalities are building more momentum when it comes to responding to U.S. tariff threats. They are joining the Team Canada approach. As Alexander Silberman reports, local governments are looking for different ways to take a stand and fight back.
As soccer teams face off in this BC border city, residents are backing their community's fight against U.S. tariffs.
We got to stand strong.
Hoping canceling a contract for new American-made bleachers will send a clear message south of the border.
They should stick with Canadian-made, and we should support our Canadian economy.
For me, that was really an important statement to make.
Surrey's mayor recently deferred a vote on a $740,000 contract for the bleachers because they're made by an Indiana company.
When we hear the comments by the President of the United States, not only are they concerning, but they're extraordinarily offensive.
That rejection of Trump's calls for a 51st state and tariffs has municipalities across Canada taking a stand. Vancouver City Council passed a motion directing staff to look at dropping American suppliers. Toronto is moving forward with a similar Buy Canadian policy. And Montreal announced it would no longer make any purchases from Amazon.
We need to look under sort of the hood of every possible way that we can make our local economy more resilient to any impact.
New soccer bleachers are just a fraction of the budget here in Surrey, where 99% of goods are already purchased in Canada. So experts say canceling contracts is largely a symbolic move.
So symbolism is important, but Canadians as well as governments or administrations should realize that we cannot take a knee-jerk reaction, which is going to hurt us.
Take your time, let's go! At the field, residents say they're happy sticking to older wooden bleachers if it means sending a message to the U.S. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Surrey, British Columbia.
and ready to spring forward this weekend? Some say we shouldn't. That story coming up. All right, as most Canadians prepare to spring forward this weekend, some are wondering how much longer we will continue to do this. U.S. President Donald Trump has talked about eliminating time changes, and several Canadian provinces have said they'll follow the U.S. lead. The CBC's Tara Carmen reports.
I personally like an extra hour light later in the day than in the morning. Yeah.
This is one of the ways Peter Warwick escapes the winter blues. But in his house, for years, something else stays the same.
One in my kitchen, one in my bedroom. I leave on daylight time. If I'm doing dishes...
In other words, he doesn't fall back an hour in November. A move he says helps his mental health.
In late September, early October, I will crash emotionally. I'll get depressed.
He's not alone in wanting to stop the seasonal time changes. Many provinces and several U.S. states are considering it. CBC News created a tool that lets you see what sticking to one time all year would be like where you live. In the Eastern time zone that Quebec and Ontario share, If both provinces choose to stick to daylight saving time year-round, on the shortest day of the year, the sun would rise in Gaspé just after 8 a.m. But in Thunder Bay, they'd see the sun almost 2 hours later.
We have a circadian clock that aligns to sun time.
Experts who study time changes say there's a better option, skipping the spring forward and staying on standard time. This is because standard time gives us more light in the morning, which is what our bodies need to regulate our sleep-wake cycles.
It will make you more alert during the day, which is good for your, just well-being and also productivity at work.
And the alternative, staying on daylight time, would mean going to work or school in the dark for much of winter in most of the country. This could put us dangerously off our natural rhythms.
This misalignment has been linked to a bunch of health consequences, cardiovascular disease being one, diabetes, some forms of cancer.
With the possibility of changes on the horizon, when is the ideal time to experience daylight is a question Canadians may have to grapple with soon. Tara Carmen, CBC News, Gibsons, BC.
Well, more than 3 years after floodwater swept across parts of BC's Lower Mainland and interior, the Canadian Red Cross is offering up new funding to those affected in return for completing a survey.
Oftentimes, recovery can look very, very different to different households, and you may discover different things as you kind of embark on your journey.
People who were registered and authenticated with the Red Cross can fill out the survey and access $1,250 of one-time money. It aims to help the nonprofit better understand the full impact of environmental disasters. Eligible participants must complete that questionnaire by March 21st. It can be found on the Canadian Red Cross website. All right, so Darius Madavi joins us again with another look at the weather. Darius, feels like some blue skies turning gray this weekend.
Yeah, that seems to be the story. Now, this atmospheric river, we've looked at this map a few times, but I think it just drives home the fact that this is a significant stream of moisture, but it's also moving south very quickly. We have these rainfall warnings in place across much of the south coast, and we can, again, expect up to 100 millimeters, over 100 millimeters in some places, but spread out over 3 days where we're going to see the worst of it, especially on the west coast of the island. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't make preparations. You should be ready, as we always should with a heavy rain event, but this won't be anything that we haven't seen before, and since it's not concentrated on one place all the way through, that's a little bit of good news. You can see here that heavy rain coming to parts of the west coast of the island in just the next few hours, continuing to work its way south, but again, moving south very quickly. Still concentrated on the west coast of the island for Saturday, but then it moves south as we get into Sunday. So again, no major populated areas should be getting this all the way through the entire period. Let's zoom out to the rest of the province now, and we can see that the interior will also be getting some snow at times, especially along the Rockies, up to 40 centimeters there. Ski resorts here on the coast can expect to get anywhere from 40 centimeters to even potentially in some places up to 100 centimeters of snowfall. And really, that's the story right through the weekend. As we get into early next week, another system will likely make its way down the coast, probably bringing us another wave of rain and snow as we get into that period, into early next week, probably reaching us Tuesday here on the southern parts of the south coast. Here are our rainfall totals that are expected over the next 60 hours or so as we get into early next week. You can see, again, very high amounts for the west coast of the island, especially at those higher elevations, but also here on the lower mainland, we can expect to see the more northern sections, the North Shore, getting very high rainfall totals as well. Inland sections also getting hit pretty hard in many places. Mission, for instance, there's 75 millimeters. In terms of temperatures, not that much exciting happening. Freezing levels will likely come up with that atmospheric river tomorrow, so that means a little bit of rain mixed in with snow at some of those elevations, maybe around 800 meters or so. The snow level probably hovering around there, but many of the ski resorts high enough that we will still see plenty of snow there as well. Conditions across the province tomorrow, again, expect some showers in the interior, but some heavy rain here on the south coast. Central coast will also see some rain, but not quite as heavy. And if we zoom in on our 5-day forecast, here we go, Baneet. We've got some heavy rain tomorrow. That's the heaviest of it, but it will return on Sunday at times. And then Monday, we get a bit of sunshine before that next system rolls in.
I mean, it feels like a good time to stay cozy.
Mm-hmm. I would say so.
All right, Darius, you know what time it is? All right, what are you sharing with us today?
I love the finger guns. Today, I would like to talk about a place where I was a few days ago here in BC, a place that's about to get a whole lot of snow, and that is Whistler. If we zoom in here, you may not know this, but Whistler, actually, the village is named after the mountain. Of course, we have Blackcomb and Whistler Mountain here, but Whistler Mountain wasn't always known as Whistler Mountain. It used to be known as London Mountain. It was named after a coal mining operation in the region, or a mining operation in the region. I'm not sure it was coal, my bad. And they decided that, there's often a lot of fog in this area. Whistler is known for the fog that forms in this valley, and people were worried that it was going to be associated with the smog in London, and they didn't want to make that association with the gross smog, so they decided to rename it, and the name they chose was Whistler, after this animal, the hoary marmot, which is affectionately known as a whistler. And I want to show you why that's the case. Take a listen to its call. Descending call, which sounds a little bit like a whistle, but these animals actually have 4 different calls. Take a listen to this one, descending. And we have its flat call here. And lastly, its trill. So you can see why they're called a whistler, and that's why that's how the mountain and the village got their name.
Well, the more you know. I never thought a marmot would be connected to Whistler, but thank you.
You're welcome.
We now bring you episode 3 of Creator Network series For Your Attention. We hear from a longtime curler who was diagnosed with ADHD at 59 and how understanding the diagnosis brought him relief and clarity.
My name is Max Stannard, and I was diagnosed with ADHD at age 30.
And my name is Sophia Bitka, and I was diagnosed with ADHD at 25.
And we've been noticing more and more people getting diagnosed as adults.
And that ADHD is a little misunderstood, and frankly kind of confusing, especially for people who recently found out that they have it.
We thought it'd be a good idea to talk to people who've been diagnosed recently and are learning more about their ADHD.
And how to thrive, now that they understand their brains a little bit better. Kent is...
my dad! And he's a pretty good curler too. Taught me everything I know.
So we went to the local curling rink so he could teach me how to curl.
When did you get diagnosed with ADHD?
About a year ago, just over a year ago.
How old were you?
I was 59. I had other things I thought, and so did my doctors. I probably thought it was more anxiety, but it was, I needed the box. I needed everything in the box, and I needed everything in the box in the right spots. Going along, and then, oh, I got to pick that up. I got to do that. Oh, shoot, I think I should do that. And then, where did I start? What did I start doing? It was exhausting. Not realizing it, but mentally, it's exhausting. I was struggling and hit a real low point. And then you had mentioned that you had been diagnosed with it and thought that I should look into that myself. And so I did. And my GP was really good. He, when I said, hey, is this genetic? We're kind of wondering about, other family members at some times. He actually had sent me to a health behavior specialist. And so we chatted for a few times, and she said, Kent, you are actually in that range of ADHD.
And have things gotten better since you got diagnosed?
Oh my God, 100%. 100%.
What's different?
Well, I learned about cognitive behavior therapy, learning about the brain and your triggers and your thoughts, and how your thoughts become your feelings, which become your actions.
Looking back, because I got diagnosed at 30, right? And then you got diagnosed after. Do you think you saw it in me as a kid too? I'm just like you saw it then, but looking back.
And I'll tell you, the thing is, always thought ADHD was the one young boy in the classroom that was disruptive. Looking at children, ADHD, we thought that that's all it was, and you were not.
Do you think curling helps with your ADHD?
It's interesting. It must. It's one thing that I've stuck with forever. I've been curling for 49 years. I grew up that the curling rink was the community center. You know, from October to April, everybody went there. When I started curling, a game was 10 ends in 2.5 hours. And I was in that little box with walls, and nothing outside mattered but what happened in that little box. And so it was that repetitive, I believe, controlled environment and the sense of community. Honestly, there was a little bit of ego involved too, because it felt good to be good at something. And then it was probably, I think you guys were 8 or 10, somewhere around there, and someone had said to me, Kent, you know, I got a dream, and I think we could go to the Olympics. Let's try. My claim to fame is we've lost the game to go to the Olympic trials twice. So it was just fun to get close and to take that big break and just go, yeah, I'm there. I could if I wanted to.
Some men, and I think this culture's changing, but with someone, you know, they're kind of waiting for somebody to tell you that there's something wrong with you. Like, you know, you play through an injury until your coach is like, hey, you can't do that anymore, right? And then no one knows how you're feeling or how your brain is working but you.
Well, everybody's different. And more so, every mind is different. And so your thoughts, some you have to deal with, and you have to figure out how to deal with them. And you can't do that on your own. You need a start, you need some help. When I got diagnosed with ADHD, I was sad in a way that I thought I'd lost out on some life, that my family lost out in some really good parts of me because I was so absorbed in other things. But I was relieved because immediately I thought, I can fix this. This is okay because I can fix this. And I'm just going to put my energy into fixing it.
I think our relationship's gotten better since we both got diagnosed too.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We understand each other a little bit better.
Well, each other, and then I think ourselves.
I see it. I feel like the last year there's been like a huge difference in you and your, just, yeah. It might not even be like your outlook on life, but the way you're able to present to the rest of the world.
I have found since I was diagnosed and actually taking some action, the anxiety and depression have dropped almost totally. Maybe it's part of positive thinking and being, I'm okay the way I am. And I don't have to be perfect. Good is good enough.
So I know when I really like a song, if within the first 3 seconds, I'm already vibing to it.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond.
It's not one person dictating what good music is, it's the community sharing what good music is.
Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
All right, Darius, before we go, we are watching this upcoming atmospheric river. What do you think people watching tonight need to know?
Right. I think the most important thing is to be prepared for some heavy rain. It will come in waves, and it will be fairly consistent through the weekend. So make sure your drains are clear, your gutters are clear, and if you can, go out during the storm after, if there's a bit of a lighter period, and make sure that those have stayed clean because things can get wiped in. Avoid travel if you can. Travel disruptions are likely. And besides that, localized flooding is possible, but widespread flooding is not expected as of now.
So stay clear from the sidewalks and the pooling. Well, thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube, and of course our website, cbc.ca/BC. I will have your next local news at 11 o'clock right after the national. Good night.